Hey everyone, a little bit of a different video here. I'm in the middle of a move right now, but I still want to make sure we have some videos going out every week. I wanted to talk to you today about the differences between open cell and closed cell spray foam and their respective applications and material properties, and how to use both successfully. Now, if you've watched this channel for any length of time, you've probably gathered that we tend to avoid spray foam in general, and there are some very specific reasons for that, and I'm still trying to put it together in a way that's as impartial as possible and won't result in some ridiculous lawsuit. But the fact remains that spray foam is a very common insulation material and a very useful insulation material when used in the right way, and there are certain times when the most practical solution is in fact spray foam. It's just a tool in our toolbox, and there are ways to set spray foam up for success so that we reduce our risk of any potential problems. This is pretty much going to be the same presentation that I gave to my team internally, but a little more succinct and to the point. So first off, what exactly is spray foam? Well, it's in the name. It's primarily a plastic foam insulation that is mixed on site in a spray rig using an A component and a B component that combine in the nozzle to create a spray applied foam that generates an exothermic reaction, which just means that it releases heat. Isocyanates make up the A component, and polyols, blowing agents, fire retardants, catalysts, and other substances make up the B component. Now, the thing about spray foam is, anyone can go and buy a spray foam rig online and start a spray foam business. If you've got Billy Bob and his brother who decide they want to start a spray foam company tomorrow, the chances that they actually nail all of the details and mixing ratios and application temperatures is basically slim to none, and this is where a lot of spray foam jobs go wrong. We have an epidemic of inexperienced applicators, which is worsened by clients who are shopping around for the cheapest insulator. This is a recipe for disaster. Quality control is a really big deal, but I digress. So, the primary benefit of spray foam is its ability to insulate and air seal hard-to-reach locations, such as around rim joists, where it expands to create an insulative foam material and an air control layer. Closed cell foam also provides the added benefit of a vapor retarder and has a higher R value per inch compared to open cell foams, which makes it highly useful for interior side condensation control, but we'll get into that in a sec. Point being, spray foam can be very useful to insulate and air seal nooks and crannies and can provide condensation control benefits if you use the right type of spray foam, that being the closed cell stuff. Now, there are two types of spray foam, open cell and closed cell, and the type of spray foam is based on their cell structure. Go figure. Open cell foam is highly vapor open and sort of resembles Swiss cheese if you were to look at it under a microscope. It can form an air control layer when applied at a thickness of around 3 inches or more. When it's applied, it expands a lot quicker and more substantially than closed cell, and you don't really need as many passes to get your desired thickness. However, it's about R 3.5 per inch, which is a little more than half the R value of closed cell. Open cell spray foams use water for the blowing agent, which creates carbon dioxide gas when it mixes with the A component, and those bubbles expand and burst to create the open cell foam that we know. Closed cell foam is denser, has a higher R value per inch at around R6 to R7 per inch, and is vapor semi-impermeable, making it similar to a sprayable version of rigid foam products. It uses different blowing agents compared to open cell spray foam. HFOs or hydrofluoroolefins are what are used for the blowing agent. Some people have a problem with the blowing agents because of the global warming potential, other people don't. We're pretty agnostic considering that if the building enclosure is designed properly with a focus on long-term durability, you won't be tearing down the building in a few decades, and you'll of course be improving the efficiency of the assemblies. Anyways, as you would imagine, the cell structure of closed cell foam is essentially these small closed spheroids which trap the blowing agent. This not only is beneficial in terms of improving the R value of the spray foam, but it gives the material vapor retarding qualities, making it a really useful material for interior condensation control. The current building codes for unvented roof assemblies here in the United States, which can be found in section R806.5 for unvented or enclosed rafter assemblies, require the use of air impermeable insulation in the cavity combined with a Class II vapor retarder if you don't install exterior insulation above the structural sheathing, which basically just translates to using closed cell spray foam or open cell foam with a vapor retarding paint. Open cell spray foam used without a vapor retarder in cold climates can lead to failures, as vapor passes through the foam and condenses on the wood substrate, which can be trapped by the roof covering like asphalt shingles, resulting in roof rot over time if that sheathing doesn't have a way to dry out at a reasonable rate. If you do use open cell spray foam in a mixed or cold climate in isolation, it absolutely must have a Class II vapor retarder applied to the interior face of the foam layer, and typically that's going to be a vapor retarding intumescent paint. While on paper this might seem feasible, I've never seen anyone do this, and I think you would be hard-pressed to find a contractor who thinks it's worth it. The practical solution for using spray foam in cold climates is to use closed-cell spray foam for condensation control, since you get those inherent vapor-retarding benefits combined with a high R value per inch. You can, of course, combine open cell and closed cell spray foam if you want, provided that you adhere to the minimum ratios necessary for condensation control, which is going to be climate dependent and project dependent. Now, what about warmer climates? We routinely see open cell spray foam being used quite frequently for both wall and unvented attic assemblies. Open cell spray foam is much less of a problem in these warmer climates because the condensation risk is a lot lower in these climates. However, in roof or attic assemblies, we still see the accumulation of moisture in the roof sheathing over time if a means of moisture removal isn't provided. What do I mean by this? Well, again, open cell spray foam is highly vapor permeable. While moisture is driven inwards during the daytime when the heat of the sun warms up the surface of the roof, we also get nighttime sky radiation, in which heat starts to escape the building through the roof to the cooler exterior environment, and this actually reverses our vapor drive from the inside outwards. Now, if we have impermeable roof coverings like asphalt shingles or impermeable underlayments or roof membranes, this moisture can get trapped beneath these layers and get stored in the sheathing and framing materials, and if enough moisture accumulates, we get rot. Now, this primarily occurs because the attic spaces aren't actually treated as conditioned space. While the attic might be coupled to the interior pressure boundary, we see problems when the attic is not receiving supply air from the HVAC distribution system. Remember, we need air circulation and air change for this to actually work. Alternatively, you could locate a dehumidifier in your attic, or you could use a combination of open cell and closed cell spray foam to mitigate the moisture accumulation as you would in a cold climate. We can also use a vapor diffusion port in combination with open cell spray foam to manage interior moisture so that when it reaches the ridge, it has a path to quickly dry out into the exterior. If you're not sure what a vapor diffusion port is, go and check out this video of ours. There'll be a link in the description below. Basically, it leverages the fact that humid warm air is going to accumulate at the highest point of the building, that being in the attic and specifically around the ridge, and the diffusion port lets that vapor out before it has a chance to cause problems. Exterior insulation also works to prevent these moisture issues in attics with open cell spray foam. Not a lot of people do both, but if it's an option, it certainly will work, and we've done it before. The exterior insulation will essentially keep the backside of the sheathing warmer, and if you're really clever, you can use a vapor-permeable exterior insulation in combination with a semi-vapor permeable air barrier over the structural sheathing and a vented roof covering to allow the roof assembly to dry in both directions. The point is, there's a lot of options here. We just have to think through the different strategies and avoid single-point failures. Now, there are some pretty cool uses for closed cell spray foam, one of which is the fact that you can insulate subslab. As closed cell is very dense and hydrophobic, you can spray it right onto the drainage rock, making it really useful for insulating basements and basement slabs, because you can essentially have one continuous layer from below the slab to the vertical surface of the foundation walls. Some people omit the vapor barrier between the slab and spray foam, and that's probably going to be fine in most cases, but code still requires that you install polyethylene or a class 1 vapor retarder between the slab and the ground, at least if you're looking at the 2024 IRC. You can also use closed cell spray foam above roof decks, specifically for flat roofs, and this is an extremely useful technique on re-roofs and retrofits, where we might need to correct the slope of the roof to ensure that water isn't ponding on the surface. Remember, you're building up the spray foam in layers or passes, and you can essentially taper the roof surface using spray foam instead of tapered board insulation. It also eliminates the need for multiple layers of rigid insulation and an air barrier below those insulation layers, since the spray foam is going to provide all of those benefits. We're getting a high R value insulation at around R7 per inch. We're getting the benefits of an air barrier and vapor retarder. We're able to use the spray foam to slope the roof, and we get our condensation control all in one product, and it'll stick to a lot of different surfaces, including aged roof membranes. Then, we just use a fleece-backed roof membrane in combination with a spray polyurethane adhesive, which will stick to the spray foam and also get into the nooks and crannies of the fleece-backed membrane, so everything actually sticks. Now, I'm not sure that I would use this on a walkable rooftop deck receiving a lot of foot traffic, but it's certainly a good option for a typical low-sloped roof retrofit if you want to reduce complexity. Now, I would be remiss not to mention some of the things to watch out for when it comes to using closed cell spray foam. Whenever you're using closed cell spray foam, you need to remember that it's a vapor retarder and it has a high R value per inch. What does this translate to? Well, if stuff gets wet, it's going to have a really hard time drying out, so it's a double-edged sword. It can be used to help keep your building dry and prevent condensation, but if moisture gets in, you've got to tear it all up. This leads us to one of the problems that we sometimes see with closed cell when it's installed in roof assemblies, particularly in cold climates, and we've talked about this in the past before in previous videos, but closed cell does have the potential to crack with building movement. What happens in cold climates, because there's a very large temperature differential between the interior conditioned space and the outdoor environment, is that we get a ton of vapor drive from the inside outwards throughout most of the year. While the closed cell spray foam is a vapor retarder, it's not a perfect vapor barrier, and will still allow a small amount of water vapor to pass through the foam. It gets stored in the structural sheathing. This isn't really a problem, and it's generally not enough for it to result in enough moisture accumulation to cause rot or anything, but it does increase the moisture content of those framing materials. We generally can't dry through the roof coverings and underlayments because they're vapor impermeable, and the moisture just stays there. During the warmer months, the heat of the sun drives that moisture back out of the foam quite rapidly, resulting in a substantial decrease in moisture content. Well, what happens when wood is dry? It contracts. And sometimes it contracts so much that the spray foam that's bonded to it can't accommodate that much movement, and we get a crack in the spray foam. Well, now that we have a crack in the spray foam, we've violated the integrity of that air barrier. Now, warm, moisture-laden air from the interior can get into that crack or crevice, and if it's cold enough, we can get condensation in that little gap. But now the problem is that the condensation can't dry out very easily because it's surrounded by spray foam, and then we get rot and deterioration. There's a pretty simple fix for this when you're in a colder climate, and that's just to install a vented roof covering or vented over roof over the structural sheathing to create a ventilation gap that allows the sheathing to dry into that space so that moisture doesn't accumulate. It also provides a secondary benefit, which is ice dam control in these cold climates that receive a lot of snowfall. If you do install a membrane over the structural sheathing, just make sure it's vapor permeable because that sheathing needs the ability to dry to prevent these issues from happening. Back to application and installation. This is sort of relevant to what we were just talking about. You need to make sure that the moisture content of your wood framing is below 18% before you apply the spray foam. 18% is really the maximum you want to go. I would probably shoot for 16%, but anything above 18% is going to risk trapping moisture at the interface between the spray foam layer and the wood structure. The longer building materials stay wet, that only increases the potential for mold growth and deterioration. You also want to make sure that the substrate is fairly clean and isn't dusty or has a bunch of particulates. The spray foam has to adhere to the substrate that it's being applied to, and if there's a layer of dust, it's going to stick to the layer of dust and not the actual substrate, which can result in the product not actually forming a bond to that surface, and then you get a little gap between your substrate and the spray foam, which can obviously cause some problems. Let's talk about retrofits for a second. We need to be very careful when applying spray foam in a retrofit situation because your building might be getting wet, but it also might be drying at a reasonably fast rate, and those small leaks might have gone unnoticed. The minute you start to retrofit a building with any insulation, but in particular spray foam, you immediately shift the moisture balance in the system because insulation reduces energy flow, vapor retarders slow vapor diffusion, and things take a very long time to dry out if they get wet. So before you even consider retrofitting your building with spray foam, you need to address all of the moisture issues first. If you don't have a drainage gap behind your existing cladding in a wet climate, or pan flashings under your windows, or evidence of staining around your framing materials or on your claddings, it would be a very dumb idea to insulate it all before addressing these things. Water management always comes first, followed by condensation control, and then we can worry about energy efficiency. Alright, now that we've got that out of the way, let's talk about mass masonry retrofits. Spray foam, specifically closed cell, can be used to insulate an existing mass wall from the interior, provided that you've addressed bulk water concentrations on the outside of the building, and it's done quite successfully in drier climates. However, we have seen some problems with this strategy in wetter climates due to the increase in volume that the brick or masonry is absorbing. Again, whenever you insulate, you're going to reduce drying, meaning that the building stays wetter for longer. If you have a masonry building that's absorbing a lot of water and you insulate it, that building is going to hold on to that water for a longer period of time. In cold, wet climates, over-insulating these mass masonry buildings can result in freeze-thaw damage. We actually have a couple of videos about this, which we will also link to in the description. There's another risk, and I would argue it's a more detrimental risk than the freeze-thaw risk, and that's the fact that a lot of these older mass masonry buildings have embedded wood components like wood joists, beams, and wood frames framed roof systems with the ends embedded into the masonry. Masonry and wood are both capillary active and will wick water because they are both porous materials. In an uninsulated building, this might not have caused problems because those embedded ends were drying out at a fast rate, but if you encapsulate those components in spray foam, we often see those joist ends rot out, and then you have a pretty substantial structural failure on your hands. So you need to be careful when it comes to retrofitting old buildings with spray foam. It can be done, but oftentimes you need to make some structural modifications in order to accommodate the installation so that the embedded wood components don't deteriorate. We also try to uncouple the spray foam from the masonry wall using a dimple mat. However, it's not always in the budget, and we have to assess it on a case-by-case basis. Guys, if you found this video helpful, make sure to leave a like, and subscribe for more weekly building science videos, and head over to our website at ASIRI-designs.com, where we have over 150 free building science articles that cover a wide range of topics. Links will be in the description below. For now, good luck with your projects. Cheers.